Welcome to Thriving Your Love, a podcast where we will guide and help you improve your most precious relationships in life. This podcast is produced and hosted by certified emotionally focused therapist Claudio Vargas Silva, licensed marriage and family therapist, and Trisha Kim Walsh, also licensed marriage and family therapist. Welcome back, viewers and listeners, to Thriving Your Love with Trish and Claudio. And this is a part 2 segment to a previous podcast recording we did on the topic of addiction and specifically the remedy for loneliness, Claudio. So again, I know my reaction whenever I hear addiction, there is a recognition of how we've experienced addiction in many different parts of our lives. And in this context, we're speaking about how addiction plays a role in romantic relationships when a partner is really seeking comfort. But if they can't receive that from their partner, what do they do when they seek it elsewhere and they seek it in the addiction and they have a relationship with it? And how that can feel like a betrayal for the partner that feels the loneliness, the grieving and the loss and the helplessness of what do I do? And I have no control over what my partner's choices are, but I'm going to make them understand if they continue to choose this addiction over me, there are going to be consequences to that. So let's get into it today, Claudio. I really appreciate this being a topic that we need to be discussing more often as therapists. And often it's a scary one because it sometimes can be so personal and it can hit home. It certainly impacts my life very deeply in many different ways. So, Claudio, I'm really thankful that we're speaking to this topic today.
Yeah, Trisha, it impacts all of us, I believe, because when I think about my life as well, I can see a similarity between me and my dad. So he was very perfectionist. He worked really hard and he was very successful in his work, but he was emotionally distant. And I think that I became like that as well. And I think that addiction is where we go when we feel lonely. Addiction is where we go when we cannot connect to a human being. This
Mm,
is why it's so important to have compassion, to have empathy towards the person who is addicted to something, even though we're not really trying to get out of the hook. But we can have compassion because, like, for example, when I think about my childhood, I remember my brother. I met him again in Rio de Janeiro, in my trip to Brazil. And then he told me for the second time that we were only the two of us at home and he was studying because there he had to have a test because at that time it was very very hard to get to medical school in Brazil. And he had, after high school, he had to study for 2 years, and he some days he studied day and night, so he couldn't miss a class that was extremely important for him. And we were only the two of us at home, and I was 3 years old. And
mm,
he told me, Claudio, I have to go to school. I have to have a class, and that's very important. And I am sad that I have to leave you here alone, but this is very important. I have to go. So he was talking to me now and showing me his concern. I can see like how this stayed with him. And then I told him that I didn't remember that. And I think that I didn't remember because of the way he talked to me. I could see that he really cared about me and that helped me, but I was 3 years old and that happened to me several times, the loneliness. But even when my parents were at home, it was hard to connect. I felt lonely if they were home as well, even though it was worse if they were not home. And then, like my dad, I became addicted to work, study.
mm,
I couldn't accept that I
right.
couldn't do something constructive. So I
Yeah.
was always worried about being productive.
Yes.
Couldn't
Yes.
accept that I would have fun and that I would connect to people. So my dad wouldn't, he thought that kids shouldn't play. They didn't need to play. So he only took me to a park once that I remember in my childhood, that just once. All he thought is that I should read, I should study. And
Yes.
then in some way, I grabbed that. And I thought that having fun, socializing, spending time with your loved ones is a waste of time. So I became addicted. And then I see that some of my clients and some people that I see, they look down on relationships. They look down on spending time with a loved one, on being vulnerable, on opening up about what they feel, about having deep conversations. They are constantly trying to do something else, something that they think is important for them. So, for some people would be looking at their cell phones and going to Instagram or Facebook or any of these social media things. For others, it might be like playing their video games. But for others, it could be also like, for example, I helped a couple that the guy, he would at night he would meet his friends. So he left his wife and his daughter at home and he would go drink with his friends and also use drugs. And he would get at home at 2 a.m.
Mm,
and then his wife couldn't sleep.
mm,
His child was asking for him and where he was and would talk to mom. And then when he got home, his wife was upset. And when she complained to him, he would be upset at her. He thought she was controlling him. He thought that he had all the right to go out and meet his friends and drink with them and use the
yeah.
drugs with them, and his wife should accept. So it was very hard for him to imagine what he was causing, the pain he was causing. He couldn't see how his child needed connection with him since he didn't value connection because probably he didn't have that in his childhood. So he looked down
Yeah.
on connecting. He thought it wasn't something important. If he wasn't worthy of his parents' attention in his childhood, why would now his child be worthy of his attention when he could do things that were more fun, such as going to meet with his friends and drink and use drugs? So we can see how these people, they look down on connection, they look down on vulnerability, on affection, and they go to those things that they learned to replace instead of the people in their lives.
Right, right, Claudio. There's so many excellent examples you're giving of how we repair within when we're experiencing internal loneliness. I see across the board in my life, in the life of my clients, and even everything you've just shared about how we as human beings are incredibly resilient, that we're looking for fixes. And the scary part about addiction is it gives us a quick outlet, a quick solution. And it happens to be that we're in a world where we have a lot of options to check out, to numb out. And we see this in many different ways. I mean, one of the examples you've used, which is one that applies to my life too, is being in the work addiction. And I'm seeing that more prevalent in the parents I work with and the couples I work with, is that when things become difficult between the two of them, that they move to a third distraction. And that often, is a justified distraction, is, hey, I'm taking of my family. I'm paying the bills. I give a good life for my kids, as long as I'm going to work and doing these things, I'm functioning, I'm contributing to society. This is a good addiction. And so I think it's really fascinating for us also to acknowledge addictions the society really supports couples and families doing, and the bad addictions. And you were speaking to drugs and alcohol and social media. And so it's an interesting spectrum that we're speaking to around how we have addictions, and do we name them as addictions, and what happens if we don't identify it as an issue, but our partner does, or our family member does, or our child does, and then it can feel like an attack, and then it becomes a never-ending cycle of the more we get criticized, the more that loneliness that happens inside is I feel judged, I feel ashamed, or I feel embarrassed, or I feel like I'm getting controlled and criticized. And what do we do, Claudio? Again, that resiliency as well. I'm going to repair this. I'm going to heal this. And there's many different ways that addictions can numb, can check out, and can give us an outlet so we don't have to feel the pain. And I keep thinking about loneliness is that inherent grieving and that loss is I wasn't seen, I wasn't understood. My hurt, my pain wasn't acknowledged. I wasn't getting validated. So the alcohol, the work, the sex, the porn, the social media, it's an outlet of a temporary distraction to say is I need that fix, that dopamine to make me feel better. To band-aid the real issue is I'm feeling lonely. I'm feeling neglected. I'm feeling rejected. I'm feeling abandoned. So
Uh-huh.
all these things that you've mentioned, Claudio, I certainly addiction in my life has definitely turned to working because it's a good feeling to say, hey, if I'm not feeling good inside, this is something that I can do and do well or get rewarded in. And I want that reward rather than I want that rejection.
Mhm. And what we see is that there's a lack of faith in the person who has the addiction because I think that they don't have a template of a healthy relationship.
Yes,
They don't have a template of human connection.
that's right.
Many of them didn't experience feeling close to someone. They
Mm,
don't know how it looks like. But the thing is that they know the addiction, right? So there is where they went and there is where they go because that is the replacement. And they are so used to do that they don't notice that they do that. And if they stop some addiction, many times they find another one because the tendencies is still inside of them.
mm.
They still didn't develop that ability to connect with someone. They didn't savor the joy of being close to someone. They are always trying to find something that
Yes.
will give them some kind of fun and meaning. But the thing is that they don't realize, and sometimes, Trisha, when I am helping my clients, I have to help them to be aware that they are numbing themselves, they are escaping, and I have to kind of give them a message. Hey, there is something that is really good. Is that what you really need? And you are trying to make up for that, but there's no makeup. And if you have that, you're not gonna need these addictions anymore. And if you have human connection, which is actually what you need inside of you, that is the only thing that will really give meaning to your life and will satiate this thirst that you have. If you do that, you're gonna find real joy in your life that you're not gonna need anymore to go to these places. But the thing, Trisha, is it's very hard to open their minds to that possibility that they become aware and that they start trying, that they become intentional, that they see what they are doing, right? And what is sad is that the addictive person is having people in his or her life, who is protesting their absence, right? Or their abandonment. So it's their child trying to play with them, trying to get their attention, trying to get them off the phone. It's the wife or the husband who is saying, hey, I want to spend more time with you. Hey, let's go out together. Let's talk. But they feel trapped. They feel, as you said, kind of controlled. And they feel like this person is preventing them from doing what they want to do. So they get mad and they don't see that that person maybe is trying to save them out of their loneliness, save them out of their addiction, and trying to bring them to what is really important in life, which is connection. That is what gives meaning, flavor, joy to our lives. It is all about people, especially the closest one to us, like our family, our friends.
Yes. It's so beautifully outlined, Claudio, that what is behind this is a desperation of love and connection. That's really what's behind loneliness, is the absence, is when we lose something, we're desperate to reconnect. But if the efforts we make are falling flat or we're getting rejected or abandoned, and we also want to acknowledge that there are genetic dispositions of people having being prone to having addictive personalities or being drawn to a disease, like using the example of alcoholism. I'm using the example of my father. He suffered from alcoholism. I have both lines of my family that have a very dangerous relationship to alcohol, and that they feel confident that they have control over it, but they don't. And they feel that it's one way to keep them going, to cope with the difficulties of life. And it really is self-medicating through the depression, the anxiety, and the trauma. And I saw how addiction took my relationship with my father away from me, and that I'm very aware of how dangerous and easy it is to fall in that path. So as we talk about this subject, right, Claudio, and I think we agreed we were going to have to do a part two, but even as we discuss this, we acknowledge that we could probably talk about this for days because there's so many layers to this. And it's so personal, and it affects our professions, and it affects the outcome of loving relationships between parent and children and partners, as well as colleagues, friends. The list goes on, as addiction impacts us in so many ways. And the individual that's saying is, please stop, see me, I'm here with you, doesn't always land that way. It's not as in always, I'm here, I love you, and we will figure this out. Sometimes it is that. And that's where I've had clients talk about interventions, formal interventions, to say, Trish, I will do whatever it takes because I don't want this to get worse. I don't want a divorce.
Mhm.
I don't want my loved one to die from this addiction. People are desperate to say is I want to find a way. So I think in kind of my reflection of today's time talking about this, Claudio, and there's so many wonderful examples you're using, is one of the first things I recommend when I'm working with clients is just to admit that there is a problem. And it's not a reflection of weakness, but it's a reflection of how much it makes sense that this has been a remedy for loneliness, a remedy for connection. And that's the first step, is acknowledging that you are powerless over the addiction, which a lot of 12 steps philosophy is the first step, is acknowledging you are powerless and helpless over the addiction.
We see, like, for example, a story of a woman who is in childhood. Her dad was violent and he had fights with her mom and he hit her mom, and she couldn't connect to him, but she couldn't connect to her mom either. So her mom was cold and didn't show affection to her, you know. So she didn't develop that ability to connect with people because she didn't have a template, as I said. There wasn't a template for her to follow. And then she noticed that it was hard for her to be affectionate to her children. And she would see how her husband was very loving, very affectionate, and the kids loved his affection, and were so driven to him, but not driven to her because, she couldn't really reciprocate, and because she also looked down on affection, because since she didn't get it, she looked down on that. And what did she do? She also became addicted to alcohol. So it's so interesting how we can see here. Now she is addicted to alcohol, and her husband is feeling abandoned and secondary to alcohol. And he fights to get her attention, to connect to her, but she feels controlled. And what does she do? She goes more to alcohol. Everything that she does is going more towards the addiction and getting away from him. And this is what I want, Trisha, to our listeners to pay attention. Like in your relationships, what do you see happening? Are you connecting to your loved ones, right? Are you doing like making efforts to connect to them? Or you are actually going away and you're going towards the addiction. And when your partner complains to you and gets upset because your partner is feeling abandoned, what do you do? Do you reassure your partner of your love? Do you listen to your partner? Or do you go more towards the addiction? Or you feel like your partner is in your way, is getting between you and the addiction, and you are mad at your partner. So it's extremely important that you pay attention to that. And when you see that there is some problem in your relationship, go to your partner, go to the people you love. Try to break that cycle of going to the addiction, and also listen to your partner, listen to your children, and see if there is something that they are trying to teach you. Be open to their influence. Let them influence you and see that maybe they are looking for you because you are very important to them, because they love you, because you mean something to them. Maybe they are not fighting with you, they are fighting for you because you are loved. And maybe it's hard for you to see love when they are trying to control you and they are protesting the distance, the abandonment. But the thing is that maybe you are worthy fighting for. And this is all that they are doing. And we hope that you may see what is really important in life. What is really important in life is people, and we shouldn't replace them with anything else. They should be first and foremost in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Claudio. I think that's a really powerful way to close for today is the reminder is you are not ever alone in this battle towards your addiction, and that it may start with a loved one who's begging you to know the worthiness of your life. And if it feels overwhelming to hear that from someone who loves you, then be reminded that we as professionals are here to provide you support. Because sometimes, and I just got off a call earlier with a client who said, "Is this is really hard to hear from my loved one." And sometimes I just need to hear it from a professional that tells me that this is a problem, because then I can really start to take into accountability that I need help. And it's easier to come from someone who I don't have a loving relationship with that is a professional to hold me accountable to say is there is help. There are resources. I can get through this. This isn't a reflection of me being unworthy or weak, that I can get this under control, because this is an issue of life and death, right? Claudio, is what is the other option? Is there are addictions that can lead to death. There are addictions that can lead to divorce and separation. And promiscuity and adultery. And so we know the other outcome is really dangerous. So we speak to you, viewers, listeners, to say is if you do recognize you have an addiction or you have a loved one who has an addiction, please reach out to us. We're here to support you with resources. And this is a journey of discovery and learning. And the first step is asking for help, especially when it comes from a loved one that says you matter and I don't want anything bad to happen to you or us. So thanks so much for tuning in. This is a topic we're going to probably continue to be checking in on. And I just always want to thank Claudio for the courage to talk about topics that we need to discuss to be better in our lives as humans. Thank you. And see you next time. Thank you so much for tuning in with us today. We hope you'll join us soon again for our next episode of Thriving Your Love.